Now, before we even go into the journey of your diplomatic service, let's begin with your journey in the civil service before you were drafted into the foreign service.
Well, thank you very much. I was appointed as administrator into the office of the second president, Dr. Frederick Jacob Titus Chiluba, in 2002. You know, I was privileged that he made me his official spokesperson, besides the issue of the position of administrator into his office. In 2011, I was appointed as permanent secretary, and I served I was appointed by President Michael Sata. So I served in Northern Province, in Eastern Province, okay, in Western Province, at Ministry of Information and Broadcasting Services, and at Cabinet Office. And then in 2015, His Excellency President Edgar Lungu appointed me as Zambia's High Commissioner to South Africa. And later in 2019, promoted me as Zambia's ambassador to the African Union, permanent representative to Ethiopia, then permanent representative to the African Union, and permanent representative to the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. That's been my journey the last 18, 19 years in the civil service. Okay.
Now, looking at 2015 until date, that marks 7 years in the foreign service. Let's look at your journey, Ambassador Mwamba. How has been your journey in the foreign service?
Oh, very, very enriching. The experience so wealthy. My journey when I served in South Africa is our largest trading partner in the region. The foreign investment that South Africa has done to this country is extensive. They're in the mining sector, they're in the retail and shopping sector, they're in the supply sector, they are farmers. So the partnership between South Africa and Zambia is extremely high. And we have the largest number of the diaspora to ensure that the investment that is here in Zambia from South Africa is secure, but also benefits the country. We had to ensure that the relationship is mutual. There was no official engagement at state level between Zambia and South Africa. We ensured that the Joint Permanent Commission was enacted into practice, and we ensured that it was promoted to what is called the binational commission. You are aware that joint permanent commissions are chaired by ministers, usually of foreign affairs or defense or home affairs. But a binational commission is chaired by the president. We had elevated it. Zambia's first binational commission is between Zambia and South Africa, and I was glad to have pioneered that process with our colleagues both at Foreign Affairs and in South Africa. That is very effective because then the two presidents sit, and when you sit as both technical and political leadership, you resolve all outstanding issues. There was spats of xenophobia at the time, and it was a very sensitive matter. We engaged to ensure, although Zambia was not affected, Zambia is held fondly by the South Africans, because during the liberation struggle, South African and its leadership lived here. Okay. You know, they waged their war and the liberation struggle, and fought from Lusaka. The ANC was headquartered here in Lusaka for 30 years. Okay. So they have an affinity for Zambians. But however, if one African is injured, we have to speak for them. So although mostly the people that were affected were Somalians, Ethiopians, or Nigerians, Zambia gave its word and its voice against xenophobia. So my stay in South Africa was both very exciting, very enriching, a wealth of experience that you accumulate, you know, to the service of your country and making your country have impact at international level.
Okay. Now, just recently, like I said in my introduction, Ambassador Mwamba, you were an ambassador in Ethiopia, and we saw there was the evacuation of Zambians just recently. Just run us through that, your stay, and the subsequent evacuation of Zambians.
My stay in Ethiopia again was another huge experience. You, as Zambian ambassador, you are accredited to the African Union. You are engaged in the work of the African Union to ensure that the Pan-African agenda is put in motion. There is criticism, very strong criticism, that the AU, African Union, is toothless. So personally, I wanted the AU to be effective. I personally wanted Zambia to participate in matters that can change the livelihoods of Africans and for the African Union to be respected. So we were extremely engaged and active in its programs, in its policies, policy decisions, policy reforms. We ensured that we made ourselves available for reforms. Talking about what you are calling the evacuation, there's been a war in Ethiopia for the last 1 year. Okay. In the northern part of the country, it's about 1,000 kilometers away from Addis Ababa. It was a regional war, but towards the end of last month, the rebels began to advance towards Ethiopia, towards Addis Ababa. And when they were 400 kilometers away from Addis Ababa and threatening to invade Addis Ababa, we made a strategic decision, encouraged people to voluntarily return home temporarily. We dispatched our female diplomats and our spouses and children so that they are not caught in harm's way. And we're privileged that His Excellency Hakainde Hichilema then intervened and ordered an immediate evacuation. So it moved from a voluntary process to a mandate where now we're compelling Zambians to evacuate from Ethiopia during this crisis. This is temporal. And that is why you saw the evacuation of those 31 Zambians that returned. And they were very, very, very excited. I think the last time we did such an evacuation was when Libya fell in 2010, 2011. We closed the embassy and evacuated the Zambians that were there. So this one, 2021, 10 years later. So the Zambians from Ethiopia were evacuated were very, very grateful to government and to President Hakainde Hichilema for that decision. You know, life is precious. You can't gamble with life. And it's better to be safe than to regret. Okay. Yeah. And so the preemptive action done by Zambia. Of course, there were other international organizations such as the UN, the US government, and other international bodies that had done similar. But Zambia was the first African country to make such a decision.
Okay. Now, let me draw your attention, Ambassador Mwamba, to matters that are closer to home. Just recently, you talked about the harassing of, in fact, you demanded to put an end to the harassing of former heads of states by successful governments, and in this case, we are talking about the former president, His Excellency President Edgar Lungu. You spoke about that matter. Kindly shed more light on that particular matter.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm against corruption. I should make it very clear. I fight corruption in my work. I've commissioned audits. I have made decisions against acts of corruption to whichever office I've held. And so I abhor corruption. I abhor irregularities that promote underhand methods. So I'm against corruption. So I wrote an article that we should stop harassing former leaders and former heads of states for one simple reason. In the peace and security architecture at the EU, we have various issues that threaten national security. So you have, for example, incumbents trying to go for third term It's a warning to peace and security. It can result into mass demonstration in other countries. It's resulting in coup d'etats. It brings instability to countries. The issue of also how you treat those former heads of state is attached to that. Why do they want third terms?
Okay.
It's because in some cases it's been identified that they fear the recrimination. What happens when I leave office? Will someone pursue me for my decisions that I made? Will they criminalize my both political and administrative decision I made as president? Then they begin to fear to leave office. So it is an issue of peace and security. It might not be a legal issue at all, okay? And it's not meant to promote impunity, no. It is not. So why did I speak against the lifting of immunity of former presidents, including that of President Edgar Lungu? First, there was a debate that President Lungu's immunity should be lifted, and I condemned it. We have not done well as a country. In 1991, when President Frederick Chiluba won, he commissioned investigations against his predecessor. And Dr. Kaunda, pre-election to 1991, was accused of having stolen $4 billion. So there was this mass hysteria. They've stolen, go after them. We brought investigators, local and international, to try to probe where that $4 billion was. They searched Dr. Kaunda, and all they found was his books, his lovely books, you know, letters to my children and cry my beloved country. There was no $4 billion. But we are, for the next 4 or 5 years, we had humiliated Dr. Kaunda. This is an elder statesman in Africa, and we literally, you know, nearly destroyed his name. Fast forward to 2001, Dr. Chiluba leaves office. President Mwanawasa comes in office, and the first thing he does is that his predecessor stolen. There is a huge campaign against his predecessor. His immunity is lifted. They are saying he has stashed millions abroad. They bring FBI, they bring serious frauds office of London, they bring Scotland Yard, and President Mwanawasa proceeded to form the task force on corruption. What did it come to other than the mass hysteria it raised? It was a huge cost to our country. We spent in excess of 40 million pounds in legal fees and other associated operational costs. It was a huge cost to our country, just divided our country. Again, fast forward 10 years later, Rupiah Banda is leaving office. Again, President Michael Sata, there are allegations. No, there's money stashed. Is it in Singapore? For oil, there's this, a list of issues, and the immunity of President Rupiah Banda is removed. And where does that end us? A gentleman, a diplomat, we attempt to destroy his name. So we don't have a good record when it comes to treating former heads of states. Every succeeding government has harassed its predecessors. Okay. And personally I've said, look, it's not worth it. And for the rest of the people that served office, when you are pursuing the crimes against them, pursue the crimes, not the personalities. Follow the evidence, don't follow the individuals. Don't segregate, discriminate, and target because they belong to the PF, therefore you target them. That's not fighting corruption. And another matter I raised was that fighting corruption is not an isolated matter of prosecution. You are not fighting corruption that way. In fact, you are doing a disservice to the fight against corruption. The fight against corruption should be institutional in nature. We need to strengthen the oversight institutions. We need to secure the public resources through strengthened procurement processes to ensure that we plug those leaks where government loses money. And we respect the Auditor General's reports. We implement their recommendations. We take preventative action. Then the end process, when the horse has left, then that's the time you want to bolt the stables. It's too late. the resources have gone. So prevent the resources from leaving government coffers in the first place. I know prosecution excites politicians and it excites citizens because then it is easier. You can say, these thieves have stolen. You do not have a job because the thieves have stolen. You don't have, the economy is bad because they stole the money.
Is this a way of politicians making excuses?
They usually use the fight against corruption as a tool, as a political tool, to vanquish their political opponents, to destroy the political party of their opponents. It is not used to fight corruption. And I've enumerated the various examples and contrasted that it doesn't mean that we are tolerant of corruption. It does not mean that we are promoting impunity. It has to be done fairly, professionally. It should not be driven by ethnic consideration. It should not be driven because someone belongs to the PF. It should not be driven in a selective manner. If A and B have committed a crime, let the law, justice should be blind. The scales of justice should balance. So don't apply the fight against corruption in a selective manner to punish your predecessors.
Okay. Talking about the selection of applying the law, there is a certain section of society that believes that these current arrests that are currently taking place are being targeted at particular individuals from a specific region. And I'm saying this, we have seen the arrest of the former defense minister, Honorable Davis Chama, and we have also seen the arrest of Mr. Brian Nyoni as well. You had something to say about this particular matter, Ambassador?
His Excellency the President Hakainde Hichilema, in his numerous speeches, he says we have to depart from the past. He says when the police arrest, they have to give you bond within 24 hours. And if the matter is not bondable but is bailable, they need to process quickly for the matter to come to court so that accused persons can then secure a court bail. Well, Honorable Davis Chama and Brian Nyoni were arrested on Saturday, and today is Thursday. They were only charged yesterday. So it's beyond the 24 hours. 2 is beyond the period in which they should have appeared in court. So I am saying we need to match our rhetoric. What we are saying with the rule of law, we should apply it. What the right hand is doing, the left hand should know. Law enforcement agencies should pay attention to what the president is saying. So what would be your justification to delay matters? If the head of state says, I don't want political violence, don't tolerate political violence, because there is some political violence going on against PF members. If the head of state says there should be no cadres in markets and bus stops, there should be no cadres in markets and bus stops. It should not be political rhetoric. It should be implemented. Otherwise, we'll have another word for it, hypocrisy. You do not want us to term pronouncements and action of the president as mere political rhetoric or hypocrisy. The officials tasked with implementation at administrative and other operational levels should listen to the head of state clearly and ensure that they implement what he says, so that they do not let him down, and that he's judged harshly by people like us, by analysts like us.
Okay. Now, coming back to the Patriotic Front, you have mentioned Patriotic Front, and this has reminded me of what transpired on Saturday. On Saturday, there was a meeting that was convened, and in this particular meeting, Ambassador, we are privy to the fact that there was a post-mortem report that was released regarding the outcome of the 2021 general elections, where the Patriotic Front participated. Are you able to give us some of the details of this particular report, Ambassador?
First of all, let me be very clear and upfront. I've been away from this country the last 7 years. I follow activities of what happens in this country because I'm very active on social media. But however, I've been away from this country since 2015. 2015. I would occasionally come in, but I've been away. Number two, the Patriotic Front has its leadership, the president, the Central Committee, and the general membership. I'm not privy to the internal process they are engaged in at the moment to handle the loss of the elections, how they have proceeded to look forward to emerge from the sad circumstances of August, elections. However, what I can say are my views, my personal views. Why did the Patriotic Front lose elections? I'm not privy to their postmortem, but I can give my opinions.
Okay.
Yeah. For example, I think that the issue of cadres was very prominent. We don't seem to learn from history. In 1991, our people punished UNIP because of issues of cadres. They were called vigilantes then. Okay. They were manning bus stops and markets. If you do not have a UNIP card, they would not allow you in the market until you produce a UNIP card. At the bus stop, they will harass you. If you stood against them, they'll throw you by air. Fast forward to 2021, we saw cadres take prominent in the life of our country, where they were harassing civil servants, where they were manning bus stops and markets. Our people rejected that, like they rejected in 2021. There are issues regarding the state of the economy. In 2015, we had one of the worst drought in 30 years, which resulted in us not having power, because we are run up to 90% by hydropower stations, which hydro means water. So those dams require to have water for the machines to run to give us power. And we didn't have that water because of the crisis we had of one of the worst drought in 30 years. And we didn't seem to recover. We had another one in 2017 and another one in 2019. And this is now being attributed to climate change, where the economy, where the climate has changed. We're having less rainfall, and when it comes, it's a flood, and it damages both crops, and then it goes away. There's been climate change. And another factor, remember, all our dams are in the driest part of our country. Iteji, Kafue Lower, Kariba Dam, they are now in the driest part of our country. And the areas with a lot of rainfall, whether it's northern Luapula or northwestern, barely have none of the hydropower stations. These dams have to wait for water to reticulate from whether Zambezi, whether Kafue, whether Luangwa, to those dams. So anyway, we had a crisis. The state of the economy was bad, compounded by COVID-19 in 2020, which shut down world economies. Supply chains were closed, and food and foodstuffs became expensive, and we were affected. Although we didn't really shut down the economy, we were affected. So power issues. Then the issue of arrogance, where our leaders displayed arrogance. They were dismissive of the opposition, mistreated members of the opposition, and they were arrogant with power. You saw cadres flashing money and all those things. Then the messaging. Personally, I can say, in 2015 election, by-election, when we lost President Michael Sat, we touted infrastructure and the work that the PF had done. In 2016, we touted infrastructure and the work that the PF had done. In 2021, we touted infrastructure. Our messaging was tired. Okay. We look at the people on the register. The bulk of them are young people. What do the young people want? They want jobs, education opportunities, empowerment opportunities. So the messaging, I think, was incoherent with the demands of the voters. Okay. Yeah, and that would be my analysis on why the Patriotic Front lost elections. I only came back on Sunday. I'm trying to use the opportunity to meet as many leaders in the PF as possible. If possible, I should access the postmortem report and understand what the technocrats have said about the loss of power. And why did the opposition win? Many factors. First, there was a protest vote against the PF, which benefited the opposition. And the opposition also spoke to the issues of young people. We'll give you jobs, we'll create 1 million jobs, we'll give you free education up to university. So they spoke to the issues of young people. And they benefited from the vote of young people. Okay. That be my analysis on the two.
Okay. Now, let me find out, you have been away from the country for quite some time, Ambassador, and now you are back. You are attempting to engage leaders of the Patriotic Front. Now, back home, I must inform you, there seems to be a leadership crisis in the PF, and we are being told that next year the party will be going to a convention. Now, looking at the party membership, I had the youth chairperson here, and according to him, the general membership thinks of going the youthful way. And since I'm seated with you here, and Ambassador, you look youthful, so let me find out from you. If at all the PF leadership, senior leadership, reaches out to you and says, could you be interested in contesting as Patriotic Front Party President, what would you say?
Thank you very much. I was listening to a press conference this afternoon by Honorable Raphael Nakachinda, who's the MCC for Information and Publicity. And he cautioned against members discussing the presidency, in fact directed that people should stop campaigning. So I'm cognizant of his directive, and I do not want to appear like I'm campaigning. That's number one. But number two, look, all my life, all I've done is service. It doesn't matter what I'm asked to. Look, I went as a young man to the office of the second president. Dr. Chiluba asked me, look, I think that you are confident. I think that you can speak for me. There are numerous issues happening every day on radio. Can you go and defend me? Here are the facts. Okay. I looked at the assignment I was given, and I obliged, and I became his official spokesperson. President Michael Sata appointed me as permanent secretary in Northern Province, what you'd consider rural area. I gladly worked in Northern Province. I arrived in Kasama. The very week I was in Luwingu, I was in Chilubi, I was in Kaputa. I slept in lodges, in huts, in tents, to do the work of the country. I have never shied away from national duties. I went to Eastern Province. I went to Western Province. At the time, it was a sensitive area. There was Linyungandambo, there was, the Barose issue. But I walked in there, engaged all the stakeholders, and just discussed development of that area. I've never shied away from leadership. Whenever I'm given an opportunity, I just serve. Okay. So, as humbling as it is, where I've seen some calls by people that maybe I could consider leadership in the PF. First of all, the PF has a structure, it has a leadership, it has a process it's going through. I don't want to rummage through it. I don't want to impose myself on that structure. I need to respect it's an institution. Okay. You do not destroy institutions. It is for that reason that I'm against people that are saying, close shop of the PF, close it. They are calling it was a criminal enterprise. Bring it down. No. Okay. We'll be doing a big disservice to democracy. We need the opposition, and we need the strong opposition to make the government run efficiently and accountable. We need someone who will remind government on their delivery service. We need institutions, especially the opposition, to remind the ruling party on their pledges and promises to the voters. So you do not want any opposition party to die. It shouldn't. We should have healthy competition of ideas and engage. I don't think anyone in opposition doesn't love this country. They all love this country as much as the people in the ruling party love the country. So we are all in it for service and for service to our people.
Okay. You have talked about service and you willing to undertake national duties, Ambassador. Let me find out from you, what kind of a leader are you? What kind of leadership qualities make you distinct from any other person out there?
First of all, I consult, and I consult greatly. I run an open door policy. You don't need an appointment to see me. I remove the strictures of bureaucracy. In my work, whether as permanent secretary or as ambassador, I ensure that I break down the bureaucratic structures that hinder progress. In fact, for example, the civil service has so many rules and regulations. You think it was designed to prevent work to be done. In fact, that's why, you know, many leaders come and fail because we haven't reformed the civil service. It's not responsive. It's too protective. And what does it protect? Because the leakages of resources are even higher than they were before. So it's a forest of bureaucracy that we have to dismantle to make work efficiently. Procurement of, for example, a road project would take 9 months. Now, you present the budget, you begin to implement the budget. To procure one road is taking 9 months. When will you do the road? Because by the time you are trying to do any major project, you are in your 5th year and you are going to an election. And the voters will be saying you have done nothing. Yet it's a bureaucratic structure. So there should be reforms. I think we've begun reforms to the procurement process to ensure that the processes are reduced from 2 to 6 weeks for major works, to make processes efficient, but also to plug the leakages of resources, to remove the corruption in those especially high-value contracts.
Okay. Talking about the PF ambassador, let me find out from you. There is a saying that is common among Zambians and in the political circles, that when a party loses power, it never bounces back into power. But let me find out from you, what are the chances of the Patriotic Front coming back in 2026? And what should they put in place to make sure that they change history?
First of all, it's a mischaracterization to say political parties that lose power do not come back. And people say, look what happened to UNIP, look what happened to MMD. If we had time, we can discuss it. What happened to UNIP was a boycott in 1996. There are 25 MPs, and there was a resurgence. They were coming back. They were going to get some more seats. But they had a candidate in Dr. Kaunda. A new constitution was passed, and it was perceived that that constitution had barred Dr. Kaunda. And so Dr. Kaunda was not allowed to stand in their interpretation of the constitution. And so he said the elections therefore can be free and fair if you bar a candidate. And they went for a total boycott. That was the end of UNIP. They lost the 25 seats they had. The momentum they were building was lost, and they've never recovered from there. MMD, again, is another story. So the story that a ruling party doesn't come back, I think requires more study. For me, in 2026, in my assessment, the biggest threat to the power of the UPND is a patriotic front. Okay. It is a patriotic front. You asked a good question. What does the patriotic front need to do? Again, I need to exercise caution not to underestimate what the party is doing with its leadership at the moment. But essentially, it remains intact. It has a national character. Its members could be feeling dejected, they could be feeling isolated, they could be feeling victimized, but they are there. The party has not collapsed. They need to pay attention to what their postmortem says and the recommendations that the postmortem has proposed. So it needs to restructure its leadership, it needs to rebuild, it needs to identify the policies that made it fail, that made it unattractive to the Zambians, and they need to engage in this love affair with Zambians all over again, because the Zambians are looking at the PF. You know, it's like an adulterous woman who's been caught and people want to stone the adulterous woman. So the PF is in that position where they're feeling guilty, they're feeling sinful. But that woman has to rise and be given another chance. So the PF need to rise from its challenges why they lost elections. The PF is the largest opposition. They have 62 members of parliament. So all is not lost. Okay. Again, it depends what the party should do between now and 2026. It should go in collaboration with the other opposition parties, engagements with the other political parties, by the same agenda of the opposition. You are aware that every time you are coming from an election, there will be alliances with a new ruling party. So parties that were members of the opposition have migrated to the new ruling party. But we don't know how long that alliance will hold. Will it rule as an alliance, or they will regress back to their role as opposition parties and begin to grow their own parties? So there are a lot of dynamics, but I hold that the Patriotic Front will still be the biggest threat to UPND in 2026. Okay.
Now, talking about UPND ambassador, they are now in charge of the affairs, of running the affairs of this country. And I want to find out from you, yes, you have been away for 7 years, but you have been active on different social media platforms. And I want to find out what has been your general observation regarding the performance of the UPND so far under 100 days.
Well, first of all, let me again congratulate President Hakainde Hichilema for winning that elections. Let me congratulate the UPND for putting up a spirited fight and displacing a ruling party. It's not easy in Africa. Africa is being held, Zambia is being held in extreme high esteem. This is the third time we are doing this, where an opposition party and its candidate wins elections, and where the ruling party and its leader hands over power, and there's a transition, and the opposition party is given power and becomes a new ruling party. Let's not underestimate that. That's a big achievement for this country. It speaks to the credentials of this country. We need to strengthen these institutions that make it possible for people to win fairly, and be handed over power. So we did it in 1991, we did it in 2011, and we've done it in 2021. So far, the 90 days, I earlier on some other platform expressed regret that UPND have done, and President Hakainde Hichilema has done 90 days. And there's no major statement. Maybe they'll do it at 100 days. I don't know. But
they'll be clocking 100 days in the next 3 days.
So in the evolution of politics, and if you watch politics across Africa and across the world, the milestones when you are 30 days in office is very big. The milestones when you are 60 days in office is very big. The milestone when you clock 90 days is very big. The milestone when you do 100 days, you need to report back to your voters. You need to report back, this is what we've done. You elected us in office, and these have been our achievements so far. You need to rekindle the hopes and aspirations of the voter. You need to carry them. So I'm disappointed that there hasn't been a major statement at 90 days. I can't criticize them. Maybe that's a style of leadership. They don't need to report to the Zambians. Maybe they have a way in which they will do the reporting back to Zambians. But it's tradition. In fact, in political campaigns, you saw even President Hakainde Hichilema says, when I'm elected at 12, at 16 hours, I'll do this. The timelines are very important, that in the next 1 week, in the next 30 days, 90 days, I'll do this. Very important. Number two, I have heard President Hakainde Hichilema speak when he was elected at Community House. I heard him speak at the United Nations. I heard him speak in Glasgow. I've heard his statement when he opened the National Assembly, the first session of the 13th National Assembly. And I've heard the speech of his Minister of Finance, who has since delivered the budget. The budget is a policy instrument. It's a tool in which to achieve everything that you promise comes down to that budget. So what are the proposals in the budget? Are they responding to the crisis of this country and to the pledges and promises that this government made to its people. I will look at the budget. There are good promises there. There is a pronouncement that 30,000 teachers will be employed. That's a very good thing. It answers to the issue of unemployment, and we have a lot of teachers up to, I'm told, 45,000 who are unemployed, so it's a very good thing. There will be health workers, up to 11,200 that will be employed. I think there will be some extension officers in the agricultural sector. And there's a speedy devolution to resources where 25.6 billion kwacha will be given as CDF to constituencies. That's a good thing. The budget is a $10 billion budget, which is 173 billion kwacha. But I'm concerned on the supply side. How will they finance the budget? One of the major proposals is that they will borrow to the extent of $4.2 billion. And I think there's a large deficit that they will open up to finance the budget. So it appears that, again, our ambition, not learning from history, we are financing our political ambitions on debt.
Okay. Does this mean that, Ambassador, we are going the IMF route? And if yes, historically, what has been the relationship between Zambia and the IMF?
So let me speak to the issue of debt. So in their campaigns towards 2021, the Patriotic Front was condemned for its borrowings, that it had contracted these huge debts, and it had contracted $11 billion in a period of 10 years. But they are proposing to borrow $4.2 billion to finance a budget which is consumptive. The PF borrowed for productive purposes to do roads, bridges, hospitals, schools. It was for productive purposes, not for consumption. So that for me is a matter of serious worry. I would like to engage the particular economist and government people on why they've taken that route. Why are we making a suit out of a cloth that can't fit the suit we want? Another policy proposal is a reliance on the IMF and the IMF package that they should be concluding by end of November or December, and that then there'll be budget support that will come from the IMF. And remember, there was special drawing rights, what is called special drawing rights by the IMF, where they give you these grants, and they give us $1.3 billion, which raise our national reserves at least to a healthy 4-5 months, support for our exports. I mean, to support our imports, import cover. But looking at the way the budget has been crafted, we are going to use the Special Drawing Rights Fund of about $1.3 billion to support this huge expenditure we have to make on teachers, on the health sector. And then we are going to borrow. How have been our relationship with IMF? It's cause for worry. It's like, as a country, we never learn from our history. Zambia it was most urbanized other than South Africa, in Southern Africa. We were the most industrialized after South Africa. We had huge manufacturing base. And our marriage with the IMF between 1991 and 1996 didn't do us justice. The privatization policy decimated our manufacturing sector. We employed import instead of manufacturing our own goods. We sold all the companies we had. Zambia had over 225 state-owned enterprises, other than a few select, like Zambia Sugar, Chilanga Cement. The entire industry is collapsed. In fact, the huge unemployment we have, especially for young people that may not understand, arises from those decisions in the 90s, where we de-industrialized our economy. So when people finish schools, they have no jobs to go to. And that was partly because of the IMF. They shepherded that economy. They directed us to privatize. They told us that it was cheaper to import. They told us these parastatals were inefficient. They said government has no business in government. And it was extremely dangerous for those, all those structural adjustment programs we implemented. We are inviting the IMF back. The IMF will tell you your wage bill is too high. You cannot have a wage bill that's 52% of your national budget is going to pay 200,000 civil servants. What about the 18 million Zambians? When will you cater for them if you are spending 52% of your national budget on these civil service, public service workers? They will ask those questions. They will say, reduce that wage bill. They will ask, they will look at the books of ZESCO. They'll tell you it's not sustainable, and bundle it and sell its various units. Maybe generation should be alone, retailing should be alone, transmission should be alone. They will prescribe to you what you need to do. They'll tell you these mines that you recently acquired, both KCM and Mopani, they'll tell you to sell them. They say it's a drain on your national coffers. The IMF never changes. Government changes, but the IMF never changes. So this enthusiasm by this government to embrace IMF needs to be watched. We need to check them. We need to ensure that they are not walking us through a path that we've walked before. We need to ensure that we learn from our mistakes of the 90s. So the exuberance being shown, that the IMF is a panacea to our problems, we need to check and question that.
Okay. Now, as we begin to wind up the program, Ambassador, let me find out from you. You worked closely with President Frederick Chiluba, may he so rest in peace, and you worked closely with former President Edgar Lungu. Let's talk about the issue of how presidents should handle themselves. You wrote an article that talked about airport tarmac interviews by President Hakainde Hichilema. I want you to zero in on that one as we begin to wind up.
Some of the worst public statements by our heads of states, whether it was President Frederick Chiluba, President Michael Sata, President Rupia Banda, President Edgar Lungu, and President Hakainde Hichilema, have been the worst. Some of the worst statements have been made at those tarmacs with fumes of jets blowing and with that high jet engine making noise. So as a PR expert, as a communication expert, I've said it spoils the reason the president has come back. Let's take, for example, that particular case. The head of state was in Glasgow. He's talking about climate change, and he's talking about both the green economy. Remember, we have to adapt to the climate change, but still develop. He's also talking about the blue economy, because Zambia has the largest water bodies in Southern Africa. We should exploit both the blue and green economies. He's made fantastic meetings in London where he's engaged major stakeholders. And he flies into the country and he's made to make that statement on the tarmac about a clique of thieves and hegemonists. And the country is engaged for a period of 1 week discussing clique of thieves and hegemonists. Is that productive? Have we done service to the president? Wouldn't it have been fair that he speaks to the matters in which he was engaged in Glasgow and in London? Those are more productive and beneficial to our economy and to our people than the statements they usually make at the airports. So I always blame our team that ran the presidency, that they need to be more careful, structure the president properly. Presidents are politicians. When you give him a microphone, he will speak. So at least help structure. You've seen heads of states, maybe Joe Biden, give a speech on the plane when they're flying on Air Force One from one area to. There is a proper briefing done before you unleash the president to the set of journalists. Mr. President, you will not speak about this. This matter, stay away. This matter, say no comment. But our message, Mr. President, is the following. We want you to speak about it. It doesn't matter what they ask you. So you need the teams around the presidency. So my condemnation is not President Hakainde Hichilema. And that's why I gave the examples of similar statements done by President Chiluba. President Manawasa gave a very unfortunate statement on the tarmac of Solwezi Airport against Northwesterners. It was deemed to be against Northwesterners. At Ndola Airport, he made a statement that was deemed to be against Bembas. So there's a likelihood to be misunderstood. For speaking at campaign platforms, I don't mind. Those are public rallies, and I think our people understand that they are politicking there.
Okay. Okay. So, Ambassador, as we now finally conclude this particular discussion, your last words to the viewers that are watching you out there, and of course, the viewers of KBN TV that tuned in to host you for the first time.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. I've been away for the last 7 years. I just want to reintroduce myself to Zambians. Maybe they've forgotten who Emmanuel Mwamba is. And, you know, over the last 7 years, people write stuff about me. They tell my story. But I'm saying, can I be allowed to tell my own story? Instead of online blogs saying the worst about you, sometimes in many times it's not even true about yourself. So I'm just reporting back to my country that, look, you sent me for national duty. I'm back. And I've now no bounds because I'm no longer a civil servant. You know, I'm no longer an ambassador. And I'm charting my way forward. Do I go farming? Do I go politics? I launched Chifwani Concepts, where I want to partner with smallholder farmers in rural areas to grow cassava. You know, I started that activity. I might go back to it. So I'm engaging. Okay. I'm meeting leaders and I'm trying to make a decision about my next phase of life.
Okay. Now you spoke about something very important, Ambassador. Before I let you go, I want to find out when hate speech is peddled against you, when somebody writes a statement that you're not comfortable with and you know this is not the truth about who Emmanuel Mwamba is, how do you handle that?
So first of all, there's been an advent of social media. It has grown, you know, from 2007 to date. Social media is both a monster and a good thing. And so it has its own downturns, cybercrime, hate speech, you know, but it also has its good things. It's instantaneous, you can communicate. You might not have power. Power could be gone, but you still can communicate because you can go on platforms if someone has power. So it has both good things and bad things. I think there's been an attempt to regulate the crimes that occur on social media. And those efforts need to be supported because sometimes those result in suicides, especially for teenagers. The names are destroyed. When the lies are peddled, people hide behind anonymous keyboards. You don't know who they are, yet they want to speak authoritatively about you. They want to expose so-called crimes that you've committed or things you haven't even said. For example, I was very sad this afternoon when I heard about the death of our MP, Honorable Levi Mkandawiro, may his soul rest in eternal peace. Other than the tragic circumstances of his death, people began to peddle lies that the Patriotic Front is celebrating, that there's a candidate from Kawata who's excited about this. That's so unfortunate. It's so un-Zambian. Those are some of the evils of social media, where people hide behind the keyboards and perpetrate things that can result into conflict and war. you know. The media ought to be careful. The media was regulated. You were regulated. You have a license. You just can't broadcast what you wish. You have a regulator. Social media has no regulator, you know, and it worries me. On the other hand, it's very good. You can communicate instantaneously. You can build businesses out of it. You can be a nobody and image somebody. So we have to strike a balance. So when I'm insulted on social media, when lies are told about me, in many cases I ignore. People come to my page and say, why haven't you banned these people that are always insulting you? On your own page, this is your Facebook page. Why are you allowing them to insult you? Why can't you block them? So I said, I allow the debate, and I hope there'll be maturity in the way we handle discussion. I want our discussions to be policy-based, issue-based. I want them to be devoid of personalities and personal attacks. It's my personal crusade. I don't know if I will succeed because social media is a monster. So I even allow people that insult me on my own page. Sometimes when the insults are too much, all I do is delete it. Rarely do I ban people on my page. But it's something we all have to learn. But what I'll tell you is embrace it. Government should embrace social media. The reason the lies are peddled is because government and its media are absent there. They need to be there. All of us need to be there. When lies are told, there should be someone who should tell the truth so that the audiences, especially the gullible audiences, have a comparison. So you have government that has not invested on social media. Many government departments don't even have a Facebook page or Twitter page. They only come to the media when a lie has been told about their department. But there should be engagement to ensure that we make our stay on social media healthy. Currently, it's not healthy.
Okay. On that note, Mr. Emmanuel Mwamba, I would like to thank you for making an appearance on State of the Nation.
Thank you, and God bless you, and thank you for listening to us. We thank you, and you know, thank you to KBN TV and your audience.
Okay, and thank you for coming through.
Thank you.
Okay. So there you have it, viewers. That was my guest for tonight, who was until recently Ambassador of Zambia to Ethiopia and permanent representative to the AU, Mr. Emmanuel Mwamba, making an appearance on State of the Nation. I have been your host, Tapelo Joe Smarter. Thank you so much for everyone that came through and gave us an opportunity to come into your homes and update you with